Death doula is a non-medical profession. We are there to companion dying folks and their carers through the dying process. Death was a time where I was unwelcome. At that time, I don't think a lot of words are necessary. He was driving his big rig. He was creating poetry that he only knew by memory. And his dying wish was that his poems be written down and made into a booklet for his family. And so I had the honor of being that person that he recited his poems to.
Welcome, Lynn, to the Light in All podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I appreciate you taking this time to do that. Today's topic is a topic that applies to all of us, and probably none of us can escape. So that's got to either be what? Death or taxes, right? Do you have a preference as to which we talk about?
I am no tax expert, so don't come to me for advice on taxes. You'll regret it.
We'll go with the death then. So yeah, as I understand it, you are a end of life or / death doula. Do you have a preference as to which title is used, or?
I really don't. I use them interchangeably. I do notice that some people get uncomfortable with the word death. So
yes,
I'll read the room when I have to.
That makes sense. So I'm sure we want to learn about the topic, but we also want to learn about Lynn and how this topic even fits with you. So maybe before we get into the definition even of what a death doula is, and I'm sure this will become a part of your answer here, my question is, what led you into this field?
It's a great question, and it's not something that I think anyone grows up planning to be.
Yeah, I haven't heard it.
No. I had moved to Florida, I think it was around 2005, with my 2 young children. I had a great aunt and uncle who lived here who had no children. And so I became the liaison for my family up north, keeping tabs on them, visiting, checking in. And as they reached their late 80s and early 90s, that became a little more involved. I was going to doctor's appointments. I was sitting at the bedside, and it was my father's aunt. Her name was Mary. She died first, and I was there through a lot of her dying process. And I like to describe Mary as being very generous with her dying process, in that she was telling me everything that she was feeling, things that she was excited about. She was really ready to go. I had never had that experience before.
Yes.
And I was so inspired by her words, I would go home and write it down. And she was describing bedside visions. She was seeing her ancestors who were my ancestors. So that was really a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
She was talking about how she said, I'm ready to get off of this ship. She said all these things that now I understand more, that she was telling me that she was going. And because of that experience, I became a hospice volunteer. So by 2007, I was a hospice volunteer, and I was sitting at the bedside for others. I learned so much from each person that I was with. In fact, my first patient that I was volunteering with, he was a poet, and he had lost his vision. He was also a truck driver in his working life. And so while he was driving his big rig, he was creating poetry that he only knew by memory. And his dying wish was that his poems be written down and made into a booklet for his family. And so I had the honor of being that person that he recited his poems to, and I wrote them down. And it brought him so much joy, but I really felt like I was the one receiving the gift there. So death very quickly taught me a lot about life. And so after my aunt died, I inherited her husband, who was, a great uncle by marriage. He was a
Yes.
little different. He was a very difficult man. I don't know how to say that any nicer. I
Yes.
loved him very much, but he was hard to work with. But I was devoted to him because I was all he had, um
You
and
were
I loved
quite
his
the
wife.
niece.
Yeah, so I cared for him for 7 years,
Wow.
and he taught me the most, I think. Through him, I
Mm.
learned the importance of advocacy because he wanted things his way no matter what, and I learned how to make sure that he had what he needed, and it was after that that I became more serious about taking this, more into a profession.
Yeah. So, had you even known there was such a thing as a death doula, or how
No.
did that even come about?
Yeah, I hear this from other people who have become doulas as well, that it's like you're already a doula, and then you find out that it's a thing. I
Okay.
When I first heard about what doulas were, it was this at this time, it was 2018, and I was still a hospice volunteer as much as I could with having, young kids, but once I heard what a death doula was, it was, one of those full body chill moments that was
Mm,
full of such
like
clarity
that's
for me.
neat.
Yeah, and I had also become very interested in ceremonies around that same time. I had, again, through my family, helped to create funeral celebrations, and I love the ritual of that, and so along with my doula training, I became a funeral celebrant. So I've been
Hmm.
doing both of those things
And
since 2018.
okay, so that's different than what typically falls under the heading of a death doula is the person who plans that ceremony?
Right, right. So I create the ceremony, and I don't know a better word, perform it, um,
Mm.
for families. Mhm. So
You
kind of
actually
MC
participate.
slash, yeah, right. So taking the
Yes.
place of a minister, oftentimes I'm hired by folks that want, something sacred, but they're not necessarily religious. And so I think that there's a space there that's really important
Mhm.
to be filled outside of religion. Oftentimes I will include prayer if that's something they ask for. But so I provide ceremonies for non religious people.
One other question I wanna ask that this kind of more of a personal nature, I guess, is I'm curious about your own faith journey and how that fits with your experience with this.
Sure. I grew up Catholic, Catholic school, 12 years, church every Sunday, the whole thing. That's something that I separated myself from as I became a young adult. However, what it instilled in me was a great respect um, for ritual, for having your own private relationship with whatever you call it, source, God.
Yes.
And so that's something that I feel in myself, and an important part of being a doula to me is that we honor other people's journeys and honor other people's faiths. So regardless of my beliefs, I'm going to honor who I'm with.
Okay.
And sometimes that might mean, learning a lot about someone else's faith, and that's always wonderful. And the
Yes.
longer I do this, the more I really see that we're really all saying the same thing, but with slightly different language.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I heard it recently that kinda hit me is we're all going up the same mountain to the top, but following different trails.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way.
Yeah. So I wonder, even thinking about what you just said, I'm wondering if the fact that you have not felt locked into a particular faith path, maybe, I don't know if that's a fair statement to make, has allowed you to maybe be more sensitive and more effective in helping others through this process?
I don't know if that's necessary to be a good doula. I think that something that we teach as doula mentors and instructors is that it's important to know your own faith while respecting the values and beliefs of others. So you can
Mm,
hold two truths. I think
okay.
that's an important piece.
Yeah. So there's something about that knowing your own faith that helps in the effectiveness of what you do.
I
Can you tell
100% believe
us a
that.
little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when I did my training, I chose the program that I did because I felt like it went pretty deep into our own beliefs and values. And I truly believe that before you can walk with others, it's important to peel back your own layers and do your own personal work around your fears and your values and understand what matters to you before you can do that with others. And so that was a big part of my training and a piece that I think
Okay.
is really vital to the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you said that. Well, tell us a little bit more about what a, I guess I want to go two big things that I think about and where we could maybe go with this conversation. One is to understand a little bit more about the work of a death doula. Um, and the second is I really want to hear what are those things that you have learned along the way, especially when, I'm intrigued by your statement of with your uncle, you feel like you learned the most. And you've implied that each experience you can learn something new and different. It's not always the same. So somehow maybe we can interweave those 2 topics and maybe start with just what is a death doula? And if, as me, as I think about myself and my mortality, what need might I have and what could that look like and just some of the practicalities of it.
Mm. Well, first of all, I'll say that a death doula is a non medical profession. We are there to companion dying folks and their carers through the dying process. And like I said before, it will be very different for each person. So depending on what part of the journey the doula comes in, will dictate what you provide. For
Okay.
example, if I have a client who doesn't even have a terminal illness, yet they're thinking about the future, I'm going to serve them in a very different way than someone who is terminally ill on hospice and is already actively dying.
Okay.
So I have a toolbox that I like to access differently depending on who I'm working with. And so I always think of it as the person who is dying is the captain of the ship, and I'm the first mate making sure they have what they need. And so they're going to dictate the journey. And so some of
Okay.
those things might be practical things. So, in the practical sense, I'm going to make sure they have, say, their paperwork in order, that they've had important conversations about how they want their estate to be managed, how who they want to give their things to, all those practical things that we hear about when they say, getting your affairs in order. So that's just really
Yes.
one piece of it. A lot of us think that once we've done that, we're done. And where I
Okay.
feel like doulas help is that we take the conversation deeper because we're going to then work on, how they want to be cared for physically, where they want to be when they're dying, who they want there, who they do not want there, how they want their body cared for after they die. Um, what they want their space to feel like. We'll ask, what music brings you joy? What readings or books or poems? What do you want to be smelling? All of those beautiful senses that we would bring into that dying space. So the doula can hold space for all of that, and that's an important conversation that we'd have with them in the physical sense. And then, of course, there's the emotional aspect of being with dying people, and a lot of those conversations are about forgiveness or relationships that you want to focus on with the time you have left. And so that can also go into grief, obviously. So there's anticipatory grief that will be uh, um, companioning. So those are important conversations that come up around emotional aspects at the end of life. There's also spiritual dimension to the end of life. For some, this is a really important aspect of it. For others, you might bring it up and they have no interest in discussing that. And that again, that's their journey. So I feel like the doula's role is to open the door for the conversation, but we're going to respect where someone is at in terms of what they want and don't want to focus on. And then lastly, another way that doulas can serve is through legacy. So that might mean important conversations about how they want to be remembered. I think that's a beautiful question to ask someone. How do you want to be remembered? And that's not something that we think about very often.
Yes.
And that also might mean finishing projects. So legacy can mean how you want to be remembered energetically, but also, there's this project that I couldn't get to. So
Yes.
it can be very broad. And again, those are five very broad dimensions, but doulas
Mhm.
can, and doulas are, like I said, referring to the toolbox, we've all have different things in our toolboxes. I know doulas that really love the paperwork aspect of things and making sure people have their T's crossed. That's not me necessarily. I will help, bring them, the tools that they need. But my love is really the emotional, spiritual side of things and being at the bedside and holding that space with people.
Yeah. You mentioned it on the spiritual side, but even those other topics, particularly I think of the emotional and the relationship, those are hard topics. Do you find that people, I'm just thinking of my own experience, that quite often, and I think this might be a bit unique to our culture, that it's just those are taboo topics almost. Like, to talk about them is to, like, you're going someplace that maybe I'm shouldn't go or something like that. Do you find that to be the case? Or do you find people, once they are at that point, they're ready to talk about those things?
Hmm. I've seen both. I think it is interesting that the closer people get to dying, there is more often than not a surrender and a no regrets way of thinking. And I think also that as a society we like to say I don't have regrets, but I don't know if we're being honest when we say that.
Yes. Yes.
So,
So you think in the death process, maybe that surrender brings out a little more of that vulnerability to talk about those things.
yes, maybe, and maybe not even talking about them, but there's a sense of peace that I've
Mm,
witnessed many times. And that's an indication for me too that they're getting closer.
I see. So there's less struggle, less maybe guilt, some of the things that we typically carry with us a long way.
Yes. Yes, and I think that this is a necessary part of the dying process and something that I've started referring to as being between the worlds. And as a doula, this is something that I want to protect because I think it's an important process and I watch it happen. I'm not privy to the inner work that they're doing, but I just know that it matters. And
Yes.
if anyone out there who's, witnessed someone dying and they're kind of here and they're not here, but they're talking, they're moving, they're doing their work. I don't know how else to say it. And I think that that's a necessary part.
That it is a process, not just an event.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as you say that, I think, oh, I've said it myself and I've heard others say it. Oh, I hope I just drop dead someday. I don't want to go through this process. I'm wondering what your thoughts are regarding that.
What I want for myself?
What you want for yourself and what you think others that you've witnessed, what their attitude would be about that going through the process.
Mm. Well, for myself, I do hope that I don't go too quickly because I want to have the experience of holding my life in my mind's eye and being able to say the words that need to be said and hear the words that I need to from the people I love. And I'm not saying we can't do all those things in our fullest living experience, but I
Yes.
think there's real beauty to end of life in that aspect. I definitely understand the desire for sudden death, and that's obviously not something that I work with very much. I wonder I wonder about that process. I mean, I do believe that there is still a reckoning that we do in the review, I imagine still happens. I can't speak to that.
Yes.
It's all a great mystery
Yeah.
to me, and it will continue to be a mystery until probably my death, I imagine, but,
Yeah. Yeah,
I do think that there's
I
value in a slower death, and I think that I understand why we don't want that because we're afraid.
but your sense is, I gather, that from once people get there, maybe they're not as afraid as they thought they should be.
Think so.
Just thinking, of course, we hear of near death experiences and what those are like. And I heard one just recently, and and this happened to be on a airplane that appeared to be crashing. So very sudden. Although when I hear that person's near death experience or heard it, I realized that even there is this element of time and process that maybe even like a second turns into what seems like minutes. So that process is still available.
I see that too, and I believe that's for me, that feels true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, I would never call myself an expert because it's just not possible.
Okay. So that's something you've learned along the way.
Yes. Yeah, there have been
It's like
times
the thing,
when
the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had a gentleman years ago. I knew he had a lot of trauma uh, that he caused to his family and had done some things that I know they were very unhappy about. I can't say that I know how he felt about it because he refused to speak to me about it. And he basically was like, "Who do you think you are?" Right? He says, "You think you're some kind of goddess?" That's what he said to me. And it really taught me something, right? This is not my journey.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I may want him to, work on forgiveness with his family and say, things that they wanted to hear from him, but that wasn't my job, right? I could just
In that
crack
case,
open the
were you
door.
hired by the family or by him? I mean, did you feel like you were just kinda imposing on his life?
100%. Well, no, not completely. I just learned, well, I was hired by his family, by his daughter, but I also learned that was where I started developing the idea that he was the captain of the ship and it was not my journey. And what he wanted to focus on was his legacy. He was so proud of his work as a soldier. And so that's all he wanted to do with me. So we created a scrapbook. And every time I met with him, he said, "No, I want this on that page, not on this page." And it was a real exercise in patience for me. But
I
that's what
bet.
he wanted. That's what mattered to him.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about I'm even thinking of your aunt and uncle where you were probably at that time, I assume you didn't even know there was such a thing as a end of life or death doula. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
I'm wondering what you learned. What were the big lessons there that really drew you in?
That time, I think the two biggest things were from Mary, I learned the beauty that was possible at the end. She really opened my eyes to the unexplainable aspect of it. She was describing, like I said, the ancestors that were in the room. She described a little girl at the foot of her bed, and she asked me if I could see her, and I couldn't. And she said, "Well, there's this little girl here. I don't know who she is." But she could name everyone else that was in the room, including my grandfather,
Hmm.
who was her brother. And I didn't find out until after Mary died that her parents had had another little girl before Mary, who they also named Mary, who died as a toddler. And that just, you know, blew my
Woo.
mind.
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
chills.
Yeah. And I've had many experiences like that since that are just full of so much beauty. So she taught me that the unexplainable, and and I don't need to know more than that. I just know that there's a comfort that accompanies the returning of the ancestors. And so I'll let people know, because a lot of us are afraid of dying because we don't know what's going to happen. So I'll demystify, the process. This is probably what this might be the next phase. You might notice
Okay,
this
so that
happening
is
or that
part
happening. Right. So, and that's good for families to know, because they might not know what to expect or what's normal. So a doula will help to demystify those. This might happen with your breathing, your coloring might do XYZ. Um, you might stop wanting to eat and drink, and you might see people coming to let you know that they're making way for you. So there's that piece of it. And like I mentioned with my uncle, he taught me a lot more about practical things because I was his um, executor and his medical surrogate, all of those things. I had never done that before. And he wanted to be in charge of how he was cared for, which is really important. We, especially, living in Florida, and I spent a lot of time in nursing homes. I feel like people lose their voice unless they have an advocate. And so he taught me about that.
yes. Okay, so that was the big lesson that you learned there as to that's important. Yeah, I often wonder, and I've actually looked into it myself and still may do, at least where I live, there's active uh, NODA, no one dies alone. and it's basically a service that where people who are in a hospital, nursing home, whatever, without family, that somebody is there. And I'm sure it's a very limited role as compared to what you do, but I'm sure there would have to be a real sense of powerlessness, surrender, and maybe that's okay. Maybe, like you said, this surrender is good in many respects, but I can imagine, uh, like in the case of your uncle, had he not had you there, how different his experience would have been.
I agree. I I still volunteer for hospice
Mhm.
just for that reason that you mentioned, Steve. I'm not there as a doula, but I'm there as a bedside companion, um, sitting vigil, and I'm called when someone is alone and in their last days for that
Yes.
reason, so that people don't die alone. And that might just mean that I'm sitting in silence, I'm holding their hand. It might mean that I'm reading or I'm playing music, but it's just being a physical presence during that time.
I'm wondering, with your experience with that, for those of our listeners who may be thinking, maybe that's something I can do. I mean, that sounds like that's where you started. Is there a reason for us to feel like would be imposing ourselves into someone's life? Here walks in a stranger at this huge moment in a person's life. What have you found to be the reception of you walking in the room?
I can't recall a time where I was unwelcome. At that time, I don't think a lot of words are necessary, especially in those last days.
You're not there to give advice that people are gonna reject or like.
No,
It's just to
I
be
don't
there.
even have to say anything. There's no words
Yeah.
necessary.
And maybe it's my own pride, and I guess I'm asking this question as if our listeners would, but really this is Steve
Okay.
asking. Um, I never want to be an imposition on someone. I think, "Oh, that is such a sacred moment for that person. How can I just walk in to that situation?" Yet at the same on the other hand, I can see how important that would be, and I'm wondering, how would I even feel about it being a relatively private person who doesn't wanna sit and chat, with someone that I can't escape because 'cause I'm
Yeah.
bedridden.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I think before you walk in the door, you get as grounded as you can be. And that's something that I do. I'll ask that whatever's needed to flow through me. And that helps me to remember to get out of the way and remember that this isn't something to be fixed. It's not my job to fix it. Those are important things kind of upstream. And then I think it's important when you come in to gently say, my name is Lynn. If it's okay with you, I'm going to sit with you for a little bit. And oftentimes, the role that I have in hospice, because it's called a vigil, it means that they're already actively dying. So they may not even have their eyes open anymore at that point. But we do believe that hearing is always um, functioning. So we just assume that they can hear you. And the other piece of it too is intuition, I think, is an important part of being at the
Mhm.
bedside. And you can start to pick up cues that are nonverbal. Sometimes I'll notice someone scooching tiny bits closer, or the opposite, scooching away. Say I put my hand on their arm and gently or little by little they start moving it away and I realize, okay, they don't want to be touched. That's okay. Or Obviously, you always wanna ask if "Do you mind if I hold your hand?" So those are a couple things to
Even
remember.
though you know they can't reply.
Right, right, right. So giving them that respect is really important,
Yes.
that autonomy.
Yes.
And so noticing little cues that's really helpful when someone's not verbal. Because if I know someone and I'm working with them, say the weeks and months towards their dying process, I have a better sense of what gives them comfort because we've talked about it. And we've talked about it with the family. We all understand what they want and what they don't want. But in the volunteer hospice role, I'm walking into a room of someone I've never met before. And I might spend a couple hours with them and never see them again. So it's a very different
Yeah.
role.
Yeah. You mentioned early on the role of the death doula is also to serve the family, the survivors. What does that look like?
Again, it's going to be different for every family. A lot of times it's explaining and educating about what they might expect. Sometimes families, they want to participate as much as possible and they don't know how to assist at the bedside. So that's another piece of educating, helping them, say, with mouth care or creating an environment that is um, comfortable for their loved one. Um, I think a big part of it is that education piece because there may be some fear, especially if someone's
Mhm.
dying at home and say they've never cared for someone who's dying. They're afraid they're going to do something wrong.
Yeah.
So a doula can give them some comfort in that way.
Yeah.
And just listening, they're going to have a lot to process. So uh, giving them the emotional care that they need. And it might also mean saying, why don't you go lay down, or take a shower, or can I make you some lunch? Take some rest. I'll wake you up if anything changes.
I see.
So having someone there for those things is really helpful too.
Yeah. A a a more logistical type question. How long are you typically engaged with the family? Is it just a few days or weeks or months, or what does that
Yes.
typically look like?
Yes.
All the above.
Yeah. All of the above. I mean, I've been called in at the time of death, and I work with people who are not yet dying that I imagine I'll be
Mm,
working with for years. So everything in between. And there are a lot of
yeah.
families. I mean, honestly, it's so intimate. It's like being uh, invited to a birth. That usually by the
Yes.
time I've been working with a family for a little while, and something that I offer is being present those last days, even if that means I'm sleeping on the couch. By that time, I feel like I'm part of the family.
Yes. I
And
can imagine.
I I stay in touch with a lot of those families.
Yeah, our connection is a fellow death doula, of that you mentored, and just in hearing her experience, she was she was telling, and I was surprised by this. She said, "Oh, I took her down to visit my family that's like 3 hours away, and we had a nice weekend visit with my family." And I think, "Wow, that that's what was wanted and needed in that case, and she's fulfilling that." So I can imagine that it's a lot of things and a lot of different things to different people.
It is, and it's not always rainbows and butterflies. I don't wanna give that impression.
Yes,
There are plenty of times where I mean, family dynamics are complicated and messy,
sure.
and especially when there's a lot of grief involved and unfinished conversations and, a lot of times it comes to a head, and I found myself in a very uncomfortable role at times of being a mediator.
Yes,
And I'm not always welcome.
by
So
everybody.
that's right. So that's something to navigate, understanding when to take a step back. It's interesting, and I've learned over time to not take it personally if there's certain members of family that aren't welcoming. And I've learned too that it's more about their relationship with the dying person and not anything to do with me. And I've also found
Right.
that at the end, when the person has died, they're the ones that say, I don't know how we could have done this without you. And so I've learned to not take anything personally because it's not the
Still
Lynn
know
show.
that you are
Yeah.
serving.
Yeah. It's not the Lynn show. I'm not there to, nor can I fix everything. So understanding when to step forward and when to, step back is, again, that's an intuitive thing that I think comes with the work.
Yeah. Two other kind of logistical things before or as we wrap up here. One is for families that are thinking about, wow, I didn't know this was available. How do they what are first steps to get in contact with someone, and what are your recommendations as to how to go about that process in hiring a doula?
Well, like I said, it is very intimate. So you want to find someone that feels like a good fit. I mean, trust is something that um, is important for me to build with each person I work with. And
Is
as
it typical that you would have like almost like an interview process or
Sure. Sure. So I provide a free consultation, whether that's over the phone or in person, and then I'll schedule a visit. Yeah, so I schedule a visit and see what their needs are and ask what kind of how I can support them and start to get that idea of what they need for their journey. I'll
Mhm.
also explain everything that I offer. I created a workbook that I published a couple years ago. I always bring that with me. And I give that to them, and it helps. And it's a really a great guide for everything that they may want to consider. So I'll leave that with them, and then I have packages, and I'll tailor them to what the needs are and how much time we may have. So depending on the number of visits, so we'll go from there into more of the practical things on that side. But when it comes to finding a doula, I find that I get my referrals from other doulas, word of mouth, and then just Google search. I come up in a Google search in my area. So I've got my website. And the other way that you can find doulas is through different directories. There are directories in the state of Florida. I was part of the Florida End of Life Doula Alliance, and that is a nonprofit that a few of us doulas created in order to connect doulas and connect people with doulas in our state. And there's also nationwide directories where you can get on the directory, put in your area, and see what doulas are available.
am I correct in assuming that most doulas operate independently? They're not part of a larger group or anything like that?
Primarily, in some areas, hospices are beginning to hire doulas. I
Mm.
hope that that continues. Um,
And
and
that
this is
would
a
be
whole
a
nother
case where the
conversation.
family would receive it free of charge in that case? It's hospice that's paying?
Right. And so because we don't have an national board that's overseeing doulas,
Mhm.
hospices can't bill for our services. And so therefore we're not hired by hospice generally. Some hospices have doula volunteers. Um, that's not something I'm interested in doing, but I know that's a great place for a lot of people to start. And like I said, in some states, doulas are being hired by hospice, but generally we are private pay. And I do
Okay.
see there are some doulas that are coming together and forming collectives so that they can share the work.
How long has this been around?
It's ancient, right? It's ancient. but I think it was in the early 2010s when people started studying it and training.
Okay. Yeah. And that leads me to the last question, and you've already given a few suggestions along the way. If one of our listeners is like, this is a work that I'm feeling a, a bit of a attraction to, and I mean that in a sincere way, um, what would be first steps for an individual?
I would say two things. Um, Being a hospice volunteer is really helpful, especially if you don't have any experience being around dying people.
Mhm.
Secondly, I would find a program that feels like a good fit for you. There are a lot of trainings out there. There are some that I think go a little deeper than others. I would go for ones that are a little longer. It might cost a
Okay.
little bit more, but um, I would find the right training program that felt like a good
A
fit for me. I'm on the
and
faculty.
again, I assume that's a matter of Googling and asking
Googling,
around.
right, and phone calls. Any program I imagined would have someone to answer the phone and explain more about it. I think that's a really important piece to just to
How
find the right
how
fit.
long are the how long typically are those programs, training
There's
programs?
no real standard. Yeah. Um,
Is it typically a year, less than that, more than that?
so less than a year. I believe mine was, I want to say 7 or 8 months. I studied with the Conscious Dying Institute, which is now the Conscious Dying Collective, and I'm on the faculty there. So obviously, I love that program. Then I
Mhm.
did my educator training with them as well.
Okay. Is that a national organization or
Yeah. So
and it
since COVID,
is it
most trainings are online.
okay, so that's what I was gonna ask. Most would be online, right? Well, Lynn, thank you so much
You're so
for
welcome.
your insight. Thank you for being on the podcast, and I'm sure what you've shared is gonna make some big differences in people's lives. And I guess more importantly than that, thank you for the wonderful work that you already are doing. I admire you greatly.
And I appreciate that. Thank you so much for inviting me and for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
There's a light that was shining when the world began. Light and heart that is shining in a woman and man. There's a light that is shining in us, in them too. It's the light that is shining, friend, in me and in you. Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light wherever you may be. In my old leather breeches and my shaggy locks, I am walking in the glory of the light, said Fox. With a book and a steeple and a bell and a key, they would bind it forever, but they can't, said he. Oh, the book, it will perish and the steeple will fall, but the light will be shining at the end of it all. Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light wherever you may be. In my old leather breeches and my shaggy locks, I am walking in the glory of the light, said Fox. If we give you a pistol, will you fight for the Lord? But you can't kill the devil with a gun or a sword. Will you swear on the Bible? I will not, said he, for the truth is more holy than the book to me. Walk in the light wherever you may be. Walk in the light wherever you may be. me of the light, said Fox. There's an ocean of darkness, and I drown in the night, till I come through the darkness to the ocean of light. You can lock me in prison, but the light will be free, and I walk in the glory of the light, said he. Walk in the light, wherever you may be. Walk in the light, wherever you may be. In your old leather breeches and your shaggy, shaggy locks, you enlightened and changed the world, George Fox.